Hi friends, it's Father Andy, and it's April 1st. And no, this is not an April Fool's video. Last Sunday, I mentioned sacred space, and I pointed out the sacred space that I had been working on to be able to offer public worship, as it were, to lead worship from my home. And I said I'd say more about sacred space, and so now I wanted to say more about sacred space. Sacred space in your home is something that some of you already have going on. I know there are some of you who have prayer rooms or creativity rooms, or you find your sacred space in the garden or in the wood shop or whatever. But I wanted to talk specifically about creating a space for prayer in your home. I don't know about you, but I don't often work well in the same space or pray well in the same space where I try to work or in the places where I try to do other things. And so setting aside a space, a designated place where you can offer your prayers or just even sit and be in God's presence is really valuable and a blessing. And maybe this is a good time to explore that. For instance, I usually have not had a very defined sacred space in my home. We've moved quite a bit in the past few years, and we've never lived somewhere where we've had a whole lot of extra space. And so I've often clung to sacred items, sacred holy things, things that I can hold that can draw me into God's presence. But having a sacred space is something that, honestly, I've even been happy for the opportunity to work on in this quarantine time. So let me show you a little bit what I have going on with my sacred space back here, and then I'll talk a little bit more about what I think sacred spaces are for. Okay, so you'll notice, first of all, I've got a crucifix on the wall. Now, I prefer a crucifix to a cross most of the time, but especially in Lent, because, well, Lent is a good time to think about Christ's passion and death, but also this is a time in which many are hurting, and Christ on the cross reminds us that Christ is with us not only in our joy, but even in our sorrow and in our pain. If you want to, to just have a cross there, but the cross is that central symbol of our faith. And so having a cross up there, I think, is extremely useful. You can see what I'm already hinting at is that having a number of symbols of the faith can convey a meaning is really valuable. So what else have I got? I've got icons. Now, you might not be an icon lover, and that's cool. I've got a couple small ones of Mary, and then I've got this famous icon of the Holy Trinity by Andrei Rublev. Couple of candles, an incense burner, a palm cross, and a couple other things that I'll point out in just a second. Icons, some people love these icons because they're ways to contemplate visually. We're so used to contemplating on Scripture, on the Word, or possibly on a crucifix or a cross. But if you're a visual person, especially, contemplating on the icons as windows to prayer, it can be very powerful. As I said, so I've got candles that I light when I'm doing morning prayer or something else that I really want to set aside, not only the space but the time. I'll light the candles. I might light the incense. I do love some incense, so there's that. Got that palm cross back there because it's been blessed, and so it's a holy thing. But these are the two items that I often have around me. So first is this set of beads. It's a rosary. It's a very simple 99-cent rosary that somebody gave me once, and I've had it for about 10 years and have prayed with it And sometimes I don't know what to pray. Sometimes I'll pray the rosary, but sometimes I don't even know what words, even with the Book of Common Prayer, with so many good words in there, sometimes I don't know what I want to say. And I just pick up those beads and hold them and let them hold me, as it were. Now, this is the other item that I often use to pray. It's just a stone. It's a river stone, a smooth stone, that somebody gave me once when I was going through a very hard time. It was actually on a retreat, and I didn't expect to be moved by something as cheesy as a prayer stone, or, that's what I thought at the time anyway, until I realized that holding this stone, the way it grips my hand and the way my hand grips it, there's something stable and something rooted about holding this stone. And it reminds me of God's never changing faithfulness towards us as well, especially in times like this. So those are a few of the symbols that I've got here, along with the Bible and my Book of Common Prayer, of course, and naturally a book of poetry, because, well, one can hardly do worse than sometimes to pray with the poets. But those are the items that I've got on in my sacred space here at home, and these help me to pray. So, what is a sacred space for? I've kind of said a little bit about it, but one thing I want to say is, what are sacred spaces for? What's a church for instance? A church is a sacred space. That's why, in the absence of being able to go to church, this is a good opportunity to think about a home sacred space, because these spaces hold our prayers, and they are sort of infused by them. They're saturated and soaked in prayers, and that's what's meaningful about them. God can be anywhere, can be found anywhere, but sometimes we need that somewhere where we know we've set aside a place for God. This is holiness in the ancient Hebrew. What it means to be holy is to be set aside, set apart for a particular designated thing. God's people are called holy. That is, they're set apart, designated for serving God, worshiping God, and being God's people in the world. And likewise, sacred space is set apart for us to come into God's presence and to recognize God's presence in our lives. Because this some place is holy, we can then recognize that anywhere can be holy and everywhere can be holy. That's kind of what I think sacred space is for. So this has just been a little bit about sacred space and sacred things. Of course, for many of you, this is you've already got your thing that's working. But if there are those of you who, like me, need a little help sometimes, I hope this video is helpful. Blessings to you, and may your sacred spaces be a blessing. Oh yes, before I forget, this is just my sacred space. There are places in our house that the boys and my wife and I have worked on. They're a little more haphazard, but this is a great opportunity too for you to invite your family to come together and decide what's special, what's sacred. How are we going to carve out this sacred space? Just like you've got that wall of pictures, maybe, of your family, or some other place where you keep mementos, and those are very special. You can do the same with your sacred space and say, what's meaningful to you? What reminds you of God? What brings you? What makes you feel connected to God and to God's love? Let's put that in this sacred space too. So get the whole family involved. It's a great way to share your faith with one another. It's a great way to learn from our children more about God, because frankly, sometimes they know a lot more than we do about God, which is pretty beautiful. So if you've got Legos in your sacred space, maybe that's for the best. Well, Well, blessings on you, and I hope this video is helpful, and I'll see you again soon.